Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seasons Podcast. We are back with Season 3, and we're so excited. If you've never listened to Seasons before, my name is Kelly.
My name is Doug.
And we are the lucky ones that get to host these conversations. And today is something different because it's just the two of us, and we're going to be setting the tone for this new season on rest, rhythms, combating what we experience in our culture that is hurry, busyness. And Doug, as just a human, but also as a pastor, I would love for you to share, why does this matter? Like, where does this idea of rest even come from, and kind of set us in our trajectory for the next few episodes?
Yeah, I think especially for people who are high achievers who live in this culture, and it's all about what you produce, what you achieve. That's where you find your identity. This is a very hard concept to grasp. But it's weaved into the very way that God created the universe. I mean, he worked and then he rested. And Adam and Eve's first day on earth was a day of rest. So we usually say we work for the weekend, but actually we're supposed to work out of our rest. So we walk into the work week with a sense of replenishment, a sense of that God is with us, and we've enjoyed what he's created for us. And I think for me, one of the most incisive comments that someone made to me about rest is they said, if you're not resting, you're afraid of something. And that's a great question to make you think, why am I unable to rest from my work, from my achievement? Because maybe I'm afraid of what I'll find out about myself if I'm not producing something.
Wow, that's powerful, and something we could all probably explore. Over the next few episodes, we're going to be interviewing different people and talking about different either seasons of rest or maybe even seasons of burnout. But for you recently, you got to experience this kind of unique thing called a sabbatical. And it comes from the idea of Sabbath. Right. So I want to just explore that a little bit for people who maybe that's a new word for them, even though as Christians, it's something that God created for us. But Sabbath is something that we should experience. And then as you got to experience sabbatical, it's this extended time of rest. So can you talk a little bit about sabbatical, just in general, not even your own, but why this is a thing and why do people do it?
Yeah, I think people are familiar with sabbatical. If you're a university professor or a teacher, and you're every 7 years or so, you take sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year off from teaching. And it's to stimulate that professor, that teacher, to think more creatively, not to get in a rut, to begin to maybe do research or to think more broadly about what they've been doing for so long. Because creativity can wane if you're just doing the same thing over and over and over. So that idea of sabbatical, comes to many pastors because we're producing content, we're producing sermons, we're doing that 2 or 3 times a week,
right?
And in front of sometimes thousands of people, and so. The chance to go, I want to step out of a rut. I want to think more spaciously and creatively about the world that God made, or about how I read his word, or the calling and burden he's put on me, or the vision he's given me for my church or my city. Yeah. And a sabbatical produces all of that for a lead pastor of a church. And
I think there can be some misconceptions around sabbatical, because a lot of times it's a provided time of rest from your employment. And some people think like you're just on a beach drinking pina coladas, you know, but there's a purpose to it. Like you're saying, there's something that is being produced. So what do you, besides creativity, like what are some of the constraints within a sabbatical that people could expect you to be doing or having during that time?
Yeah, we spent, Suzanne and I spent a year preparing for our sabbatical. So we prepared our team for our sabbatical, for us not being there. Who's going to be in charge? What's the flow of decision making? Who's going to be preaching? What are the series we're going to be doing? So how do we prepare our team, our church for this process? And then how do we prepare ourselves? So we talked to a bunch of other pastors who'd done sabbatical way better than we had. For our church, it's a brand new idea. Yeah. So we got a sabbatical coach. We got someone who helped us sort of architect our time. Our time happened to be 3 months. And so we basically talked about our goals for sabbatical. And so the idea is, how are you going to spend time all by yourself in reflection? And so we created moments for that for myself and for my wife. How are you going to spend time, enjoying your marriage and, falling in love all over again? And so we spent purpose time, structuring time for us as a couple. How are you going to spend time with family? with all the kids together and doing things? And then how are you going to spend time with old friends you haven't talked to for a long time? And maybe see, God's, not just God's creation, but ministries that are happening around the world that can inspire you in new ways. So all of those were built into this sabbatical time.
And obviously, this is unique. Like, you're a pastor. Not everybody's job is to be a pastor. Not everybody's job is to be a university professor. So before we get into your unique experience and what, you took away from the months that you were away, how can people kind of look at this conversation as a relatable experience for them? Like, how do you take a 3-month experience and turn it into a rhythm that we could start practicing right away in just our normal week or month or year?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a great invitation from Jesus in Mark chapter 6, where he says to his disciples, after a busy couple of weeks of life and ministry and activity, he says, come away with me by yourself and rest for a while. And there's something really powerful about that. And the disciples would always see Jesus would disappear or late at night, early in the morning, and he was always spending time on his own. So there's this pattern both in the creation where God gives us the command to rest for our own soul. It's not because he demands it of us. He wants it for us. And then Jesus' invitation, come and rest, come away. I got you. You don't have to be producing anything, and some good things are going to happen in this space.
Yeah.
And so for me, practicing just a daily time of quiet time at night and in the morning it's been a practice. It's taken time for me because I like to be producing something, achieving something. So just sit all by myself and not do anything feels very unproductive.
Yeah.
But I'm learning to realize that when you embrace your limits and you trust that what God says here is the best way for you to be used by him, then you begin to embrace those daily rhythms, those weekly rhythms of Sabbath, and then the annual rhythms of retreat. So for the business owner who's like, I can't take 3 months away, so what about a week? Right. And so I've got some friends, and they're high achievers, and they're doing all these things. I said, what if you took just 2 days away at your lake house, and you put your phone, like in jail, you turned off all the TVs, and you sat with a Bible and a journal and a cup of coffee.
People are getting afraid right now
I know.
as you're saying that.
And honestly, people get terrified. Like, what will I do? The first time I did 24-hour retreat, I almost went crazy. I was walking around the house. I'm like, this is dumb.
I need my phone.
Yeah,
I need my phone.
I'm an extrovert, but you'd be surprised if you quiet your life and quiet your soul. You'd be surprised what comes out.
Yeah.
And that's what people are sometimes afraid of. They're afraid of the quiet because they don't want to deal with stuff that's here, things in the past.
Yeah.
And so they cover it with productivity.
Yep.
And they don't realize they're eroding their own souls.
Yeah, it's that verse, Mark 8:7-8. What is it to gain the whole world,
and
but lose your soul? And that's where we're at. I think in our culture, especially in the West, in America, even I've heard people from Europe visit, and there is a marked difference in our pace and in our busyness. I'm not even going to say productivity because it doesn't always amount to more. It's just an identity we've taken. And I know for myself, it's something I battle all the time of like, I'm busy. I'm booked and busy, Is that something to be proud of? Is that something to try and achieve? I don't think so. That's not the invitation from Jesus. So I think if you're listening now, although this experience of a sabbatical, this extended time of rest with a purpose, it might not be available for everyone at this length, but the invitation is still there to receive in a 24-hour period, a week period, 2-week period, whatever it is. And so we're going to go into kind of your personal experience over the last few months. You're kind of fresh off of this sabbatical, a few months now back. So I do want to just talk about, how did you even know you needed one? Did we make you do this? Did we tell you? Did you raise your hand? It could be different, but for you personally, how did you get to this point knowing you and Suzanne planned for a year? So obviously there was something that you were talking about, but how did you get to a sabbatical?
Yeah, we had watched a bunch of other pastors kind of burn out, and you're sort of wondering like, could that happen to us?
Yeah.
And so as we talked to these pastors who had this rhythm of sabbatical, we asked them, how do you do it? How do you structure it? Who's it for? How long is it? And so the more we talked, the more we thought this is going to be, I think, a really proactive thing for all of our pastors. So we had a couple of pastors do it the first year. They were kind of our lab rats, guinea pigs.
Testers.
And then we got better at what's the pre-plan, what's the post-plan, how to both come into a sabbatical, come out of a sabbatical, how do you prepare everyone for it? And so by the time we went, this was the third summer we've done this, and we had a lot of good input into our sabbatical. And I think the thing for us is the way I knew I was tired is I think I was probably mentally exhausted, because it was, every week you're preparing not just a weekend message, but you're preparing a devotion for the staff or something for the students at CCA or something in the community. You're constantly preparing things in your mind, and you're constantly walking into meetings and people are looking at you.
Yeah.
And then there's all the crisis stuff. Oh, my neighbor just died. I just got a cancer diagnosis. So you're taking on a lot of the physical, emotional, and spiritual weight of people. Mm-hmm. And so what that did for me was it made my mind tired, and it made my emotions numb. Mm-hmm. So by the time my wife and I were going to sabbatical, we weren't feeling deeply either super joyful feelings or super sad feelings. It was sort of like this numb inner space. Mm-hmm. And that's when you're like, oh, we probably waited too long to do this. Because we
really made you ready for it.
Yeah. So I think it's recognizing that sense of emotional and spiritual fatigue, not just physical fatigue, that can, everyone has their limits. Yeah. And, I've always sort of prided myself, and you press through, you grit your teeth, you do the next right thing, and it's all going to work out. But this sabbatical was an absolute gift, because we've come back with a reservoir of peace and joy and perseverance maybe that we didn't have before, where you're just exhausted. Mm-hmm. And actually, Mindy Calvary gave me some great words about how to describe this, because, as a man in this culture, like, you don't want to say, you don't want to acknowledge weakness. So she goes, Doug, I have a great word for you. It's called depleted. I'm like, okay, I can work on that word.
You can handle that.
So she's like, you're describing depletion. Mm-hmm. And so, you're an athlete, if you're exercising and you need electrolytes, you drink a Gatorade or something because your body's depleted. I got that. She goes, you're spiritually and emotionally depleted. And this is a way to kind of refresh your soul. And so that language helped me go, I needed to give myself permission to do this. Mm-hmm. And that's what gave me permission to do it. Mm-hmm. Besides the fact that my wife says, we're going to do this.
Yeah. Your wife, I think that she's a great counterpart to you, because she's the one saying, you're not okay. We're not okay. And part of what I think everybody needs to embrace in their life is people like that, where you think you're covering up the fact that you're in a numb space spiritually or physically or emotionally. People notice. Like, I can see that your eyes looked like a glazed donut, and so I think everybody right now needs to recognize, like, do I have people in my life that I let know me enough to say, hey, grab your shoulder and say, I think you need a break, or I think that you may be depleted.
There you go.
Depleted. That's a good word. So you and Suzanne recognize this. You're in this season. You're going away. And you talked about preparing for a year, but you got something unique, a coach that walks you through this experience. And not everybody may have that. But what are some of the things that he prepared you for to help walk through that season? Besides how to spend your time, what were some of the things he told you may experience, or maybe even filters he gave you on how to filter your experience over those months?
Yeah, I think one of the most helpful things is that he gave examples of all the spiritual leaders in the Bible who took these times away. So Moses, takes his time away, 40 days and 40 nights in the mountain, all by himself with God. Elijah does the same thing. Jesus does the same thing in the wilderness. And for Moses and Elijah, it was, okay, I'm more than halfway through my life. Where do I go from here? God, what do I do next? And each of them were depleted in their own way, and God gave them a fresh revelation of who he was and what he wanted them to do. And so they walked down from that mountain with a sense of, God's with me. I know what I'm supposed to do next, and I'm ready. And even Jesus, when he came away from his 40 days of solitude, he announced the kingdom of God is here. So it was the prequel for his coming out of the kingdom of God. Yeah. And so, one of the things that, I'm not sure who told me this, but it was a great picture. It was, isolation is putting yourself in a cage, but solitude is putting your distractions in a cage. And so it's like, how do I get rid of all the distractions in my life? Put them in a cage so I can actually think clearly about my life and who God is and who I'm becoming as a person, and all of those things that really affect the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of distraction, that is kind of the point of taking such a purposed time away. You're removing everything that can come into your day unexpectedly, or all the responsibilities that you hold. But there is, like, in that opportunity, there's also things that you are leaving behind that you cared about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even probably as you slept, things went through your mind and you have dreams about things you have to do at work. I'm talking about my own experience here. So talk a little bit about that part of it where you're expectant on what you're moving toward, but you're also walking away from a job that you have been running.
Right.
You have been responsible for, and obviously you have a team, but how do you let that go? How do you trust them? Where does that all come together in this process of preparation and leaving?
Yeah. So the best way I can describe it is it's like practice dying. Like if you died,
Yeah.
everything would go on without you.
What?
And people would be like, who's that guy? And so it was like you die for a minute.
Yeah.
And everything goes on, and then you realize, wow, it doesn't depend on me. And if I died, this is actually would be what would happen. So, am I good with the leaders in place and the direction and those kind of things? So, it's a feeling of surrender that's actually very liberating because you realize it doesn't depend on me, and God will still work through His church and through these people.
Yep.
And so for me, that was a great moment. I mean, one of the things I got to do is I got to read through all of my journals for the last 35 years. And read all the times that I thought like, oh no, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then you see how God sort of swung that door a totally different direction. And the worst things became the best things. And the best things became things that, at the end, it was like, that wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. It was. And, one of the things I read, a friend gave me a book for a sabbatical. It's called The Listening Day. And I'm just going to read this because it talks about what a day may bring. And to me, this is one of the most, I read this maybe a dozen times in a couple of day period. It talks about life. It says, so today could see you laugh or weep, curse the heavens or bless the whole world. It could see you fall into the darkest sin or rise to unimagined righteousness. It could hold death for your family, sickness for your friends, good fortune for your enemies, or the opposite of all those. You could lose your reputation today or gain a better one. You could feast or find yourself hungry. You might be alive when the stars appear tonight. You might not be. And all your plans could go through or none of them. Like a breeze carries the morning fog to places the mist doesn't choose. So boast of nothing. Of what can I be confident then? Your Father's love. Turn to me. I am faithful. I promise that the world is changeable, carrying you where you don't expect. My goodness is in every place, and I will help you find it and learn to rest forever in my hand. And to me, that was just like one of the most kind of refreshing truths that I don't want to boast about tomorrow because tomorrow's not promised. I don't want to trust in my accomplishments or what Calvary may do or the ministries that I'm a part of may accomplish. I just want to know that I'm loved by God and that He's given me another day that's a gift. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So out of that place, that surrendered posture, you're now away from everything that you know as your norm. You have a team you've left behind to run everything, and you're just there to embrace, like what that said, the day as it comes. What surprised you through this experience? Like, obviously, you've never been through such a targeted time of rest, but you probably had expectations. And I think people carry expectations of what you're going to experience. Like, you're coming back like Moses or like Jesus with this amazing vision.
So much pressure
for the future.
When you come back, you're going to come back from the mountain and tell us exactly what we're supposed to do.
You better have the most amazing vision for the next 5 years, So what surprised you about your time away?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that my sabbatical coach, he's another pastor, he said, you want to find out the answer to the question, who is Doug when he's not achieving something? He goes, just keep exploring that question. So I purpose not to prepare any sermons or to solve any problems or to sketch down the next 20 years.
Yeah.
I just purpose to wake up with the sunrise every day and go to bed with the sunset or a little after and just live a very simple life. And so I was pleasantly surprised that I embraced simplicity and enjoyed it and didn't get anxious about I'm not doing anything. So a lot of my time I spent on a paddleboard wherever I was. And one of my favorite mornings was at the sunrise paddleboarding with a manatee family of 5 for an hour. And just
family of 5.
Yeah, just family of 5, and just they just watching them swim and watching them protect the little pup that's in the middle, and just watching the simplicity of hearing the waves lap, watch the
Yeah.
sun rise, hear the wind on your face, and just God's like, this is my sanctuary. This is what I see every day. And all the stress of traffic on I-95 and all the things, the financial, commitments you have to
Yeah.
meet, and all the obligations to lead a staff. None of those are on you today. So just enjoy this day as a gift. And so there were moments of like the awe of God in creation and simplicity that were very like just calming to me. And so I was pleasantly surprised. I think I slept like 8, 9, 10 hours a night.
Wow.
Which is not normal for me.
Right.
And, no social media, not a lot.
That's kind of normal for you, though.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of normal, but like none, zero.
Yes.
And not a lot of like watching the news or a lot of the things other than just a quick,
Yeah.
get a little bit of information. And it's amazing how simple your life can get, how the anxiety seems to flow away, and how surrender about your life, your health, your family, your future sort of just carries you.
Yeah, and I have a question about, like, even you brought up the news, and I think there's something that we tend to do where you remove yourself, or maybe like you're talking about distraction. So you remove distractions of work and of your normal day-to-day rhythm. But how do you prevent yourself from filling that up with another consuming thing? Like, I can easily go on a vacation and leave work, but I can quickly be consumed by something in that new environment. So how did you keep yourself rooted in simplicity instead of latching onto another thing, like being consumed by the news or by a schedule or by this idea of achieving something,
Yeah, I think that there were structured times where we were doing activities that were purposeful, so it was busier. And then there were times where for this week, we're not going to do anything other than just wake up and see what the day brings. I think I must have read like maybe 15 different books, but none of them were the type of books I typically read. I read like, one of my favorites was like the biography of Wilbur and Orville Wright, the Wright brothers, and how they created a flying machine, and how they tested this process over and over and over, and just thinking creatively, innovatively, like the level of grit and perseverance of people who create stuff out of nothing, and the level of ridicule they endured. You're going to make a machine that flies. You guys are idiots. and the amount of fame and wealth they got, and how it didn't affect them. Like one of their friends said, this is the two people most unaffected by wealth and fame I've ever seen are the Wright brothers. And so you get a sense of like stories that are outside of how you would typically learn and grow. We're like, and I want to learn from people who innovate like that, who endure ridicule because they know that what they're going to do is something God showed them. And even if they become famous, it doesn't change them. And so those stories are like analogous to your story in some ways, but you're not learning the same way you would learn. So your mind is thinking about, what has God done in my life? And have I been affected by fame and fortune? Have I been, has my thinking got dumbed down to just avoid criticism and just do the safe thing? All these things are happening as you listen to these things. So some of the learning is intentional, but it's not the same type of learning that I would typically do.
Yeah. Because I think for anyone, like, if you're in a season of learning in your craft or career, you're always going to be reading or consuming things that will make you a better version of whatever you're trying to be. But what that is keeping you and doing is a constant state of comparison, which is exhausting, to continually be reminded that you're not measuring up to who you want to be, or to the industry standard, or to the perfect church, or the church that's growing immensely, or whatever. So I think that is a great opportunity for anyone to change up what they're consuming and to almost diversify like your intake, because it's an invitation to take away something deeper than just what you're achieving in your job or in your career.
Yeah, I think most people in with the vacation they're in are in a rut and they don't realize it because they're only consuming certain things. Either the algorithm of what they look at on social media, or the group of books they listen to. They're all from the same type of people in the same century, from the same worldview. And so their view is just very myopic. And one of the things that I was challenged to do is read books from different centuries, from different continents. And, when you read books from different centuries and different continents and people that are not like you, you see the world and the gospel and all in these much more broad ways. And it helps you to think more clearly about the generation or century you're in.
Yeah, that's a really great challenge. Wow. Could I do that?
I got some books for you, Kelly.
Okay, wow. I love reading your recommendations. Thank you for those. So now changing it a little bit, what was like I would say just what was hard? What was the hardest part about being either away or being in this rhythm or knowing it was going to end? Like what would you say was maybe a hard part that you had to either face or overcome or just accept?
Yeah, so one of the things that our sabbatical coach did was he actually spent time with my wife and I talking about just the way we relate after 30 years of marriage. Like what ruts have we gotten in? And he gave me this piece of paper that is the bane of my existence.
Oh no.
It's like an emotional funnel. It talks about like thoughts and actions. Like
Okay.
I want to, if we have a problem, let's figure out, let's solve it. I don't want to, venture down into the I'm hurt, I'm lonely, I'm
How
sad.
are you feeling?
Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't want to do any of that. And so he's like, you have to live below this line where emotion, and you have to sit with your own emotions and you have to sit with your wife's emotions and not try to get out of them as quick as you can. And I'm like, well, shoot, I've spent my whole life trying to get out of them as quick as I can.
You've got to change, I guess, after 30 years of
Look at
marriage.
Yeah. And so he basically had me sit with both my wife's emotions and my emotions, and it was so uncomfortable, like speaking a different language. One of the things I read in this part of the season was this, and it says, on retreat, there's time and space to attend to what's real in your own life. So celebrate the joys, which I'm great at, grieve the losses, which I'm horrible at, shed tears, which I try to avoid at all costs, sit with questions, feel anger, attend to my loneliness, and allow God to be with me in all those places.
Wow.
And then this is so I'm like, okay. But then the next sentence is, these are not times for problem solving or fixing, because not everything can be fixed or solved. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, that was what you were going to do.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And then it just says, and here we rest with God with all these things. And then we come back to the battle with fresh energy and keener insight. So I think for me, I realized I get defensive to avoid seeing something from someone else's perspective or with dealing with those emotions. Or I try to listen and find my way out as fast as I can. It's not that I'm not listening. I'm just going, okay, that was 20 minutes of emotion. I'm like, I need air. It's like, I need oxygen.
Get me out of here.
And so just learning to sit with that and go, it's okay to feel that very uncomfortable place where you don't have any answers.
Yeah.
And you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, and you have to say some empathetic statement that I don't know how to say very well, like that must be really hard, or come up with some kind of way to, so for me that was all like foreign language. I mean, I do it, but it's still not, I can do it for short periods of time, and learning to do it for a longer period of time with my wife, with a counselor.
Wow.
I was like, oh yeah, this is like excruciating.
All the guys probably are relating, and the girls are like, what do you mean we do this every day?
Everyone's going to want to know the name of the sabbatical coach, right? Call this guy, sign my husband up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
guys.
Sorry, he's not a marriage counselor, you guys, and he's not a savior. He's just a sabbatical coach. So, but we're grateful you got that, because obviously the things
I needed it.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to say that. And neither was Suzanne. She's not going to tell anybody that. But did you feel like after that exercise or that prompting that you grew in that area, or you recognize it more and it's more natural? Like you got the time and space to practice, and now that's applied.
Yeah, I recognized, my defensiveness, especially with my wife when she brings things up. I recognized my defensiveness came up because, I feel like, is she attacking me or what's happening without all the information? I always wanted to fill in the blanks. Well, you don't know this, you don't know this, you don't know this. And just like listen and sit with her in the frustration or hurt of what she's in, because that's real for her. It's not about, clarifying what is or isn't. It's about sitting with that and just being human in the moment. And so being comfortable in that messy middle section of conflict or life or solving problems is something I have more of a, I don't know what the word is, maybe a resilience to not try to get out of it so quick.
So quick, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
We're happy for that. Yeah. Awesome. Now, thinking about that idea of this big aha moment, don't want to put you on the spot, but did it come?
Yeah, I think it came not in the way I expected.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest aha for me was I sort of got my awe back. Your awe of creation, like climbing. We went to Switzerland. You're climbing on the base of the Matterhorn. You're in the Glacier Valley. You're above the clouds.
Tell everyone what you did.
Which part?
The thing that I would just never.
Then we jumped off the mountain. So I paraglided.
Jumped off the mountain.
And that was that was also another really cool moment of surrender where you're like literally soaring above the eagles. You're like 4,000 feet above the valley floor. The Alps are 2,000 feet above you, and you're being held by 2 bungee cords and a cantilever on each side. And you realize, like, if that bungee cord wasn't made correctly, I'm going to plummet 4,000 feet to my death. So if God wants me to come back and be the pastor, I guess I will.
This is our test.
So it was literally an awesome experience. And I think that, the awe of creation, the awe of what God has made, and then just thinking about our whole lives. My wife and I have been married, 30 years, and 3 grown sons. And think about all the things that I read in my journal, things that I prayed when I was 20. God, could you do this in my life or that in my life? And realizing how many of those prayers he answered, way bigger than I ever thought. And then coming back here to Calvary, because we went to different churches and had different church experiences.
Yeah, you weren't around here at all. You didn't come to our church. You didn't, watch service online. You were exploring other places and other teachings. And
so I realized how much I love this place and how many awesome things have happened here. That sort of are just, I take for granted. They're part of what we do every day. So when I came back into worship for the first time, experienced the first altar call for the first time, watching people come forward in tears. The biggest crowd I'd been in front of for 3 months was like 5 people at dinner. So you step back onto this platform and there's thousands of people. And stimulus overload.
You forgot you did this all the time.
But the first time I had to teach, I was a little bit nervous. Like, I don't know if I can do this again. And it was just amazing to see people again and hear their journeys over the last 3 months and see what God had done in their life. And so it was good.
And that brings us to the place where we can wrap up kind of your experience. How do you reenter? Like, you've embraced this idea of simplicity, and I think everybody can relate to like being away on a vacation. It's like you just experienced a time away that was a completely different place and schedule and requirement of you. But after 3 months, how do you reenter and not go to exactly how you were? Because for us, like somebody who was here that whole time, counting down the days till you were coming back, you have expectations of how you'll return and what you're going to take on. And we have so many questions for you and we're waiting on answers. And so how do you resist the urge and the demand to go right back to where you started?
Yeah, it is like a gravitational pull. It wants to pull you right back. So
we're sorry, by the way.
People, it's like you're going 35 miles an hour on a ramp to go on I-95. Everyone's going 80, and you're like, if I don't accelerate, I'm dead. But this is where a sabbatical coach is really helpful. So he said 2 things. He said, one is when you're gone, you want to pay attention to not just how you and your schedule might change, but how your church might have changed and grown without you there. And so you don't want to jump back in for your sake or the church's sake. And so we had several leaders here step up into new spots of leadership. And so, I didn't step back into some of those roles and giving other leaders the chance to keep leading. I'm not going to step into this space or this space or this space. And so my schedule is actually lighter now than it has been in a while.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Right? I can think again.
Yeah.
So my schedule has a little more space in it where I can actually be more of a spiritual father to people and just speak into people's lives without leading meetings or solving problems or casting vision. And we have leaders that have been working together for a while. And so watching those leaders step up has been good for them. It's been good for our church. It's been great for me. And so I think there's a lightness coming out of it that's going to help our staff and our church and frankly, our city.
And is there an excitement to come back to work, to your role, to did it confirm a love that you have for what you do? Or are you like, I'm out of here, you guys. Good luck.
Yeah, no, I think, when I read through all of those journals from 35 years, you start to make connections that you don't necessarily make if you're just thinking about the past. They say like the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest memory. So what you write down 35 years ago and you put yourself in the room or 30 years ago, you can talk to your 20-year-old self and you can hear what your 20-year-old self is saying. And then you look at your, now 53-year-old self and you're like, wow, there's some things that I've learned since I've been 20 that are really good.
Yeah.
That like naive confidence in myself or in God. It was really in me, but I thought it was in God. That's gone. And that's good that it's gone. But there was a 20-something-year-old Doug who was very prophetic and spoke very decisively, maybe in a more self-righteous way than I would have liked, but there's a part of that I want to get back.
Yeah.
And so, but I look at all that to say all that has led me here to this moment.
Yep.
And you can see how God opened and closed doors to get you where you are.
Yeah.
And that's a gift to be able to have that perspective.
And be confident that you're right exactly where he wants you to be. He's placed
Absolutely.
you in this place. So for all the people listening, like we said in the beginning, this is a unique experience that not everybody's going to get at this length or with this ability to have a coach or this help or a whole team that stands behind you. But you and Suzanne, your wife, have always done a great job of at least prioritizing rhythms in your life. So as we end this time, kicking off this season of rest, I'd love for you to just help everyone out by giving us the constructs of rhythms on that day, week, month, year. How can we help people right now say, okay, I'm feeling the weight of my responsibilities. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling unappreciated or underappreciated, unseen, all these like emotions that come with burnout and busyness. And how can we help them find space to breathe, to think, to hear their thoughts and uncover what's going on in their soul?
Yeah, so, Rick Warren's taught this for like 30, 40 years, divert daily. Every day to find a space in the morning, at night, maybe both, where you can just get quiet and sit outside. And you're not necessarily like just praying. Sometimes I'll just go for a walk and just watch the sunrise. And you're just quietly thinking and praying and preparing for your day and asking God for wisdom and just being in the presence of God.
There's a good point to what you're saying, because I think even right in that, most people would put on headphones and they'd listen to a podcast about how to be better at something, or they would put
listen
on
to a podcast on solitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just practice solitude. Just be away from stimulus, except for the breath in your lungs, the beat of your heart, and the work of creation that God is doing.
Yeah.
There's something so calming and centering and reorienting about that. And so that's a morning practice for me. Sometimes it's a night practice.
So divert daily. Okay.
Then the next one is withdraw weekly. So that's the Sabbath. So that's push everything out of a 24-hour period of time in your life. So for me, that's Sunday afternoon to Monday afternoon. And pretty much I'm not answering emails. I'm not paying bills. I mean, for me, I mow the lawn because that to me is therapeutic. So they say if you work with your head, rest with your hands. So for me, physical work is restful to me. It's not, it's not. So I play basketball. I do things. I go to the beach. We paddleboard. But finding ways that you can rest with your body and your soul and your mind are it's a practice. I've gotten better and better and better at Sabbath, but I used to be horrible at it. Every time the phone rang, I would answer it. I mean, now everything goes to voicemail on Sabbath. And then I ask myself the question, can this wait till tomorrow? And our team knows, don't call on Sunday afternoon or Monday unless something's on fire.
Yes.
So we've trained ourselves, our staff, our team to create that 24-hour block. And so divert daily, withdraw weekly, and then abandon annually. It's finding times of retreat where you completely abandon whatever you're doing and just surrender it to God. The business, the church, the activity, the nonprofit, and make sure good leaders are in charge, make sure who knows what they're doing, and then just realize it doesn't all depend on you. And, I want to just share a picture of what will happen if you live a life like this. So Psalm 92 is like this beautiful picture of an older person who's still young. And it's Psalm 92, verse 12. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They're going to grow like a cedar planted in the house of the Lord, and they will flourish in the courts of our God, and they will still bear fruit in old age, and they will stay fresh and green. And I always love to meet that person who are in their 80s or maybe even the 90s, and there's like a childlike joy and curiosity. They haven't gotten cynical. They haven't gotten tired. They haven't gotten apathetic. They're alive, fully alive. And I always say, I want to be an old person like that. If God lets me live in the 80s and 90s, I want to be an older person who's excited about life, curious about what God is doing. And that only happens if you rest well in the process.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So divert daily. What was the second?
Withdraw
weekly.
Abandon annually.
Abandon annually. Everybody can do that. That's the thing. It doesn't matter what vocation you're in, career path, if you're in school, even as a student or as a teacher, there are rhythms that you can build into your life and fight for those. What was that quote you always used to tell us?
I have no idea.
You are, it's like not ridiculously in charge of your own schedule.
You're ridiculously in charge of your own schedule.
Is it? You're ridiculously.
So when people say I can't do this, Lance Witt was the guy who said that. He says, you're ridiculously in charge of your own schedule, which means you're just making excuses. You'll do what's, if it's important to you, you'll do it. And we find that in every area of life.
Yeah.
And I'd say for all those like workout athlete achiever people, I read this study that the difference between Olympic level athletes and athletes who are really, really good but not Olympic level is not how hard they work. It's the rhythm of rest and recovery between workouts. And so that resonates a lot with people too. I want to be at the top of my game. Rest sounds like laziness. Rest sounds like I'm missing opportunities. And the rest actually makes you the best at your game.
Yeah, that's actually similar to a quote in this book, which we don't do a lot of plugs for books and things, but I will say that this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, written by John Mark Comer, he talks a little bit about, the people who work 70 hours. It's actually that they're not producing that much more than people who work 50, 40 hours. It's the level of stress and busyness they put around everything that they do. And so there's a realization in that you will work better when you're resting better. So there was a quote in here. I just want to end here.
One of the books that I recommended that you read.
And I read it
multiple
times.
That's good.
Be proud, yes. This is about limitations, which you mentioned earlier, and I think it's something that we are all afraid to face in our life because limitations are looked at as weaknesses instead of opportunities to stop. So it says, what if these limitations aren't something to fight, but to gratefully accept as a signpost to God and his call on our souls? And I think that our culture, like we said earlier, there's this idea and this push that we need to push past our own limits to become somebody else or to be better than someone else, when really God's made us exactly who we are to be. And he's given us signals and signs to say, actually, you might go too far. And there's a danger in doing that, not just for physical health or emotional health, but for your soul. So as we end this episode and go into future episodes, can you just talk a little bit about why do we talk so much about soul care? Like, we're going to be talking about that in episodes to come. We've talked about it here, but it's this thing we talk about in church, this idea of caring for your soul. But sometimes people don't even remember they have a soul, realistically.
Yeah, it's important to remember. I mean, Solomon was the most accomplished, wealthiest, most influential king in all of Israel's history. And one of his most cautionary proverbs is, guard your soul with all your heart, with all your diligence. It's the wellspring of your life. And he wrote that, but he didn't do it. And so, there's something about acknowledging if you don't take care of your soul, everything you build will fall apart. And that's Solomon's legacy, because he didn't take his own advice or God's good advice. So for those people who are thinking about, what do I want to accomplish at the end of my life? You're going to pass everything you've accomplished on to someone else. And if you don't have those patterns of rest, you'll never raise up the right type of leader. If you don't have those patterns of rest, you'll pass on a frenzied legacy that's not going to last.
Yeah, and I think that just gets me excited about future episodes, because we are going to talk about things like burnout, and we're going to talk to people who have experienced extreme seasons of busyness and hard work that led to failure sometimes and walking away from things that they built. And I think we overlook those things in culture and quickly can dismiss people as unsuccessful when really they were people who worked so hard for a certain amount of time and then lost everything because their soul wasn't cared for. So I'm really grateful, Doug, for you opening up about your personal experience, but also just your wisdom in this area, because you have been somebody who's led our church, our staff, our community really in this idea and practice of rest and rhythm. So we're grateful for you for sharing. You're still learning, but you're learning ahead of us. So thank you. And you're invited to just listen to future episodes and hear more about people's stories and ways that you can practically apply this idea of rest and caring for your soul. We're really excited to see how even a conversation like this, somebody's personal experience, can help you in your day-to-day life, in your job, and caring for your families and friends. And so we invite you back for the next episode as we continue in season 3. Thanks, Doug. We'll see you next time.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Seasons podcast. Our hosts are Pastor Doug Sauder and 𝘾𝙯𝙍𝙍. Seasons is produced by Calvary Chapel Fort Lauderdale, and our theme song is Seasons by Connor Henderson with Calvary Music. For more information about our church or this podcast, visit calvaryftl.org.